Hello, hello. So be careful as you're climbing with bags and boots and coats. And we're going to jump into our next presentation, which is some work we've been doing here at the Weisman Center about related to supporting adults on the spectrum. So just to jump right in, why should we provide support? And I'm talking about a developmental period called emerging adulthood. I'm a developmental psychologist by training, and what we've learned is that you don't turn 18 and suddenly are an adult, that it's a period of growth and development that actually is really important. And so why should we provide support to individuals during this time and to their families? As some of you who may have gone through this process already may know, is that there's a really significant loss of services when people exit school and move into what happens next. Not surprisingly, this period of emerging into adult life can be very stressful for individuals on the autism spectrum, and in turn can be very stressful for the people who love them and spend life with them. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of research about adults and aging and ASD, and even less on what are the best ways to provide support. So I said, I think that we have a pretty good sense that it can be stressful and that there can be challenges, but we don't really know how to help. And so what I'm going to talk today is some of the work we've been doing to try to answer that question. So we decided to develop a program called Working Together, based on sort of this need of how do we help individuals on the spectrum really land into adulthood in a way that they feel good about and those who love them feel good about. So we really started by trying to understand from families who have been through this process of transition into adult life, what has worked for them. So we have a 15-year longitudinal study that many in the room actually have participated in here at the Weisman Center, where we were able to find clues into what worked best for the prior generation of families. And we also conducted lots of focus groups with individuals on the spectrum, with their family members, their service providers. We took all of that information and did some small piloting of a curriculum, and then continued to refine, worked with a stakeholder advisory board. Really, that if you're trying to develop an intervention or a treatment or services, you don't just make it up and then decide that it works. It really should be an iterative process of connecting to see not only does it change the outcomes you're interested in, but does the person with autism want to do the thing you're wanting to provide them, right? And so if it isn't engaging or feeling beneficial to someone on the spectrum, we probably shouldn't persist in trying to push it on them or spread it around the country. So the program, after all of this long period of development and back and forth to try to refine the curriculum, we landed with a program that had 3 main goals. So to provide education on topics related to ASD during adulthood, provide opportunities for social networking and support, both for people with autism and their family members, and then in all of this, really emphasizing positivity and problem solving. So some of what we've heard about already today around the evidence base for cognitive behavioral therapies and strategies is that we know that we can empower people to figure problems out for themselves, and how can we do that in a way that's supportive. And for this particular study, we were interested in, for the adults on the spectrum, were they engaging in activities that they found meaningful, and what was their behavioral functioning. And I'm going to focus on the behavioral functioning today, mainly because we just heard about anxiety and ADHD, and so I thought you might be interested in some of our findings related to that. So how does this program that we developed work? We have 2 sessions that would be just with an individual family, so the young adult on the spectrum and their family members who might want to participate. And that's a time to really listen and understand sort of the history for the person on the spectrum, and their goals and hopes for the future. We find that a lot of times there haven't been opportunities to really listen, and so this is a good time for people to really share their journey. And individuals and families actually have a lot of expertise in themselves and their lives and what has worked up until the point that they're 25, right? And so as practitioners and professionals, we really need to listen to that. And so that's why when people ask, like, oh, could we cut that out? No, because you need to take time to get to know people individually. Then there are 8 weekly multi-family group sessions, so multiple families come together in the same room. And we tend to have the young adults on the spectrum in one room and then their family members in a different room. For this particular study, we also wanted to follow families not just for the 8 weeks, but over a period of several months in a less intensive way, knowing that what we're doing, emerging into adulthood, doesn't happen overnight. And so in some of our prior work, we found that providing that ongoing support probably would be helpful. And then ongoing resources and referrals to things that might not be targeted specifically by this 8-week curriculum, but we know families might be looking for and needing. So here are the session topics, again, that were established in sort of this iterative process where sort of families come together. The second week, we really focus on goal setting and problem solving. It's not always the easiest thing to set a goal and know how to do that. And for many people on the spectrum, life hasn't always worked out. And so it can actually be really hard to think about setting a goal if the world hasn't been fair and you haven't achieved some goals in the past. And so to be brave and to try to do that again can be hard. And so we talk about goal setting, and then when maybe you don't immediately have success in your goal, how can you look at what's happened and try to solve the problem and take the step again? And so we really hit that right at the beginning. And then we get into coping strategies, planning for independence. So what are the things you want to do more by yourself as an adult, and what would that look like? Employment, because that's often an activity that is meaningful for people, including people on the spectrum. Community and relationships, personal safety. I think that we all need to think about ways that engaging in the world without like your parents there all the time, that how can we do that in a way that feels safe? And then health and well-being. I mentioned before, we have a whole line of work looking at stress and its impact on health. And so if we know that individuals on the spectrum have a high amount of stress, their families do, we need to really be thinking carefully about how we are maintaining our health and well-being and be really intentional about that. So those are our topics. And I said, again, we work with the young adults for them to think about their goals. And I thought you might be interested to see the types of goals. We've actually categorized across all the adults that have participated with us what their goals are. And 70% of the young adults were really interested in a goal that was job related. I think what's really important, and a new area for me of research actually, is a lot of them wanted a job that was a steady job, that felt like a career job, that wasn't going to be like short term and come and go. We see a lot of employment instability for adults on the spectrum, and I think that, like many of us, they really don't want something that's only going to be short term or unsteady, or something that doesn't feel meaningful to them. And so I think that's really important when we think about employment. It's not just, oh, they have a job today and check that off the list and now we're done. It's how can we think about careers for individuals on the spectrum, because that is important to them. A little less than half had goals that were social, so either wanting to make friends because they didn't feel that they had any, or spending more time with the friends they had. A little under half had goals we put in the category of independence. So maybe they didn't want to live with their parents anymore. They wanted to get a driver's license. That's something that they felt they might be able to try, and they wanted to try it out. Interestingly, and this was not what we sort of were saying the intervention was about, a quarter of them had goals related to health, so very personal goals about knowing they needed to lose weight, wanting to exercise more, feeling like there were a lot of barriers for them to be in good health and trying to take some action themselves around their eating or their exercise. And I think that that was something I wasn't necessarily expecting, and now I want to be more mindful of partnering with people on the spectrum related to health. And almost 30% had something I would consider like a personal goal or something that's really kind of hard to categorize. So they wanted to start a blog, or maybe they are really into, like here are these examples, like they wanted a cat, right? So that's really kind of personal, and I think that's important that sometimes, particularly in the educational setting when we're doing transition planning, it's all about get them a job and they need to have the daily living skills so they can do their own laundry. But when we're thinking about adult life and what's meaningful for someone, well, maybe we should think about, could we get them a cat? And how could we do that in a way that's going to make sense? So we did a randomized waitlist control trial. So this means that the control group were people that were waiting eventually to get the program, but they didn't initially. And we had families in Wisconsin as well as Minnesota. And for this particular study, it was an average to high IQ sample, and I can talk a little bit about our future work for other subgroups of the autism spectrum, but that was the group. And 80% had at least one mental health diagnosis. So again, we were talking about anxiety, ADHD. This was a group that did have pretty significant co-occurring other challenges. So what I'm going to talk to you now is just a little bit of the data that we collected at baseline, 3 months and 6 months. Again, the period of time of the intervention was 6 months, but the first 3 months were more intensive and the last 3 months were less intensive. Importantly, at the start of the study, there weren't any differences between the groups on anything. So randomization worked, which is always really good, that we can feel confident that the changes that we see weren't because they were different at the beginning. So just quickly, one, and it doesn't look very impressive when you see it on the slide this way, but I think it's really meaningful. So these are behavioral challenges. So these would be challenges such as what we were talking about already this morning. So withdrawing and having difficulty being around people, difficulty sort of doing inappropriate social outbursts, so like saying, like laughing at the wrong times, different types of both internalizing and externalizing behaviors. The blue line are the people in the intervention, the red line are the people in the control group. Basically, over time, the number of these behavioral challenges the control group had didn't change over the 6-month period of time, but those in the intervention, they had fewer behavioral challenges over time. So they actually dropped a behavior problem, which we were really encouraged about in a pretty short amount of time. And when you really dig in, what it seems like is some of those withdrawal behaviors were becoming less severe, and the ability to inhibit some of those socially inappropriate things were also becoming better for the intervention group. And we have other, so these are sort of the challenges based on the parents' report. We also have data from the young adult and their perspective on their own personal growth, which sort of shows similar patterns. So that's encouraging too. And I'm happy to talk more about the other data. I want to move quickly because I know we're mindful of time. That also, again, it's important if you're going to be doing an intervention or a treatment or a service for adults, well, all people, but particularly adults, they need to think it's valuable to them, and that is what we found. And that young adults on the spectrum reported learning many things from being in the group. Here you can see the list. I want to point out these aren't in any particular order, because we found it, depending on when you ask someone with autism what they learned, how they rank things and what seems to rise to the surface in their mind is most important shifts. So when we would ask the young adults what they were learning from being in the group sessions right away, like at the time we were doing the groups, they would really say things like employment, being independent, sort of those daily living skills or problem solving skills. those were the things they talked about learning, which made sense. That's what we were working on in group. That was encouraging to us. When we waited to the end, till 6 months, where they had had time to kind of reflect and they weren't coming to group all the time anymore, the things they talked about were actually how much they appreciated being with other people on the spectrum in the group together and getting to know the other people in their group, as well as getting to know themselves. And so they would talk a lot about having some aha moments and this sort of sense of personal growth and development, which I think is interesting and something to think about. When we do intervention research, we need to think about a range of outcomes. At least in our sample we found for the individuals with autism, when they had more time to reflect, maybe what was most meaningful to them about the program was different with time. So here's some quotes. These are from the emerging adults. I've learned a lot about other people's experiences, other young people my age with autism, about how they cope with it, and about like daily life and getting jobs, keeping jobs. I've made a couple of friends through it. It really helped me a lot and taught a lot about other people with my condition. Next, the reason I got along with them is because we have a lot of the same issues and we can work together to fix them. I was the oldest one in the group and I've had a lot of experiences throughout my life. So being able to share my experiences with them made me feel better about myself. It truly did. And I know earlier we were talking about therapy often happens on an individual basis. I think this really shows the power of being able to have a group-based support because that connection came up again and again as the young adults had time to reflect. Parents also reflected, and things parents said that they learned were a little bit different. But anyway, I've learned how to help her better understand how her brain works. Really having it broken down and explained made us view her in a little different way. I'm learning to be more patient. I've realized that other kids have the exact same things going on as our daughter, and we thought it was just us. It was great to, this is another parent, it was great to meet other people going through similar kinds of issues. Having the bigger group for problem solving was good, since they had different experiences, and it would generate a lot of different ideas that you would never think of. So again, I think bringing parents together in a very heavily structured way to do problem solving, not just a not just a free-for-all to like say all the terrible things that are happening in life, but really a focus on looking for solutions also I think is valuable for parents. So to wrap up, we do think that this type of approach is valuable for adults on the spectrum and their families, and we're really excited to try to continue to do more analyses and to do this in a more diverse sample, and I mean diverse in a lot of different ways. We just have a little bit of funding to try to adapt this model for individuals on the spectrum who have intellectual disability and maybe minimally verbal. And so we're really excited to take this work in that direction. Also, I just want to make a shameless plug that we are doing a new type of model in partnership with Vanderbilt University around parent advocacy and for anyone ages 16 to 26 for parents. And there are no exclusions. So wherever you are on the spectrum, you are welcome to participate. So come see me and I can tell you more about that. So thank you. I know many of you have participated and I feel like you are my partners and co-researchers in this. And so thank you so much to the families and obviously our many collaborators at the Weissman Center. Thank you. Teresa, do we have a minute for a question or should we wait for the panel? I don't know where Teresa is to tell me what to do next. Okay. Okay, so while the panel is coming up, I could field a question or two and then the panel is going to come, and I know the panel and James and I can answer questions too about our work.
All right. We have a question down here in the front.
Do we know of any groups for teens and parents that meet regularly besides just research studies?
Yeah, so I would, this is why it's wonderful the Autism Society is co-sponsoring this event, so I know they're going to be talking a little bit about their program, and I know they have a table, so, and they do have activities, so, I don't even want to pretend to say what their programming is because I would misrepresent it, but I know that they do. That's a great question. Thank you.
We got one right here.
Sorry if I missed this earlier, but the Working Together program, this is an ongoing program? Are you still?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm right here, sorry.
I'm like, I can't find you. Okay, yes.
Are you still seeking participants in this program? Is this an ongoing thing?
So this is a,
Thank
it was a research-based program, and we are currently in the analysis place, so we're not recruiting actively for new participants, but we were hoping to. So maybe in another year or so, we would be enrolling more people again. So, and like I said, for this other program that would be more specific to parents, we're really needing people to sign up now. So, but that would just be for parents to participate for that one. Yeah. Hopefully soon. Thank you.